The Clarity Act is heading for markup, and the turf war over prediction markets is also heating up. We're going to talk about that and more live here from Consensus in Miami Beach. Let's go. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Daily Wolf on Yahoo Finance. I'm your host, Scott Melker, also known as the Wolf of All Streets, and we're doing something a little bit different today. Usually you get me ranting and raving for 15 minutes about the news of the day, trying to separate the signal from the noise. Today I have a partner to rant and rave about everything that's happening in this industry. I've got Paul Grewal here, the CLO of Coinbase. You have got to be the busiest man in this industry.
Definitely have a few things going on, but it's always great to chat, Scott.
So you kind of joked when we were talking that 5 p.m. can be a very different landscape than 8 a.m. It seems like the Clarity Act is probably a great example of that. So in the words of Brian Armstrong, mark it up, right? It's time. We got the deal between also Brooks and Tillis, and it seems like we're ready to move forward on this thing. What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is it's always a pleasure to work for someone who chooses his words carefully. I think Brian was exactly right in this instance. It's time to mark it up. Look, Scott, we've been at this now in some cases for years, and it's very exciting that we're finally on the cusp of real market structure legislation for the first time in the U.S. We've made tremendous progress on a number of the key issues that have kept a variety of interested parties apart for some time. And I think it's clear that the Senate Banking Committee, just as the Senate Ag Committee before it and the House before that, understands that America needs sensible rules for crypto, and the time to put those rules in place is now.
Well, when I read the reception from the world on this proposed deal, it seems like everybody hates it, which means we've got to be doing the right thing.
I think that's usually the case with compromise, especially in Washington. And it's interesting to me that everybody hates it, not only for different reasons, but often for contradictory reasons. The reality, though, is that this is legislation that I think is good for crypto. It's good for consumer and investor confidence, and it's also good for American competitiveness, which means if we focus on what matters in the end, we're going to get this thing over the hump.
So Coinbase was very much at the center of this. Obviously, we had that famous moment where people believed we were going to markup, and Brian wrote the long thread basically saying, no deal's better than a bad deal. Right? Do you think that now we're in the situation where we have a much better deal? And how does this, I guess, impact Coinbase directly?
I do think we have a better deal, even if it's not a perfect deal. Look, the reality is Brian has always been clear that principle will always trump short-term interest, and Coinbase has always focused on what ultimately makes sense for the health of the industry and the health of the community. We are pleased that after some initial hiccups, I think, in the process, the Senate kept at it. The Banking Committee in particular kept working to get to sensible resolution of the issues that remain in dispute, whether it's rewards, whether it's DeFi, whether it's protecting developers. And we think we're close on this. Now, the Senate will ultimately have the final word. I think it's very important for people to always remember the Senate does not work for the industry. The industry serves the Senate as much as any other interest in this discussion. And we're hopeful, based on what we've seen so far, that the final language that will go through markup and ultimately move on to the Senate floor for a vote will be the right language. It will be language that moves the industry forward, moves the community forward in ways that we think are very, very positive.
Let's talk about that language. So,
let's do it.
You know, obviously it's sort of the banks can keep their deposits and do bank things, and the crypto industry, I kind of like to think of it like we get crypto rewards, credit card rewards. But it seems like there's a massive gray area in between that would have to probably be litigated on the ground to some degree. Is it a reward if you move your coins from one wallet to another wallet and hold them there?
Well, look, lawyers are going to litigate. That's what we do. But I think if you take a step back, it becomes very clear that the Senate Banking Committee, and in particular Senator Tillis and Senator Alsabrook, heard the concerns. They heard concerns from the crypto community that rewards might be at risk. They also heard concerns from the banking trades that somehow preserving and protecting the ability to pay rewards based on idle yield, as they called it, bank deposit subsidies, would somehow threaten their enterprise. The reality is there's been zero evidence ever offered that stablecoin rewards threaten banks or bank health in any way whatsoever. And yet it's important that, compromise ultimately be reached in order to move ahead. And so I think that's what Senator Tillis, Senator Alsabrook have done. Candidly, Scott, I'm a little confused as to why the banks can't take yes for an answer. They got what they want. The reality is that the law of the land today is genius, and under genius, all rewards by intermediaries, not just including Coinbase, but many others, are fair game. And so now with this draft language that we've seen, there will be changes to that structure. So they won. They got what they wanted, and yet they seem to be snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
I find that so interesting because this definitively extended the prohibition from the Genius Act, right? It was just the issuers at that time. So if you were Circle, obviously, you were concerned, or anyone else issuing a stablecoin. Now it's everybody.
Correct.
What is there left to fear?
Well, I don't think there's anything serious left to fear. I think what this shows is that the banking trades all along had a much broader agenda than simply addressing concerns about a non-existent risk of deposit flight. They were focused, maybe even laser focused from the very beginning on killing rewards. That didn't happen, at least under this draft language. And it's important to underscore, this is still draft language. Yes. We'll see what ultimately comes out of the process. But by picking up their marbles and essentially going home and claiming that somehow there's still work to be done, I think what they're showing us all is they never were interested in forging a reasonable compromise here or addressing legitimate concerns. They simply wanted to take rewards out of crypto entirely.
Yeah, so before we move on from this topic, what do you see as the next big debate or stumbling blocks potentially for the Clarity Act? Because this is one piece of many. It's been the one that everybody's been focused on, but it's certainly not the only one.
Well, I'm very hopeful that we will reach a compromise on the other issues that remain in play. As I mentioned earlier, there still is work to be done on developer protections. There still is work to be done on making sure that DeFi is protected, which has always been a primary goal and an essential goal for us. And frankly, there also is work that remains to be done to make sure that the SEC's flexibility and discretion to protect new initiatives like tokenization of assets remains intact. So I think there is work outstanding, but I'm very hopeful that the work will ultimately land in the right place.
Moving on to the next topic, where there's work outstanding, prediction markets, right? There was this curious moment last week where or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now, the New York AG, I would say, singled out Gemini and Coinbase for illegal gambling in the form of prediction markets. Curiously, did not go after everybody else. You immediately had that sent to federal court, but I think that we have a turf war clearly between the CFTC seemingly and the states, and you've been right in the middle of it.
We have been, and yet in many ways, Scott, this is a movie that we've seen before. Certainly, I think our experience with the Gensler regime under the previous administration has informed our view that sometimes there is a time to talk, sometimes there is a time to negotiate, and sometimes there's just time to stand and fight. And I think prediction markets are in one of those moments where you see state regulators and certain state attorneys general all over the country trying to grab power, trying to grab authority that the law doesn't give them. Congress was very clear when they amended the Commodities Exchange Act and adopted a very broad definition of swaps, that this was an issue for the CFTC and the CFTC alone. And if that weren't clear from the plain language that I referenced, it was made even more clear when they added additional language. It said, this is exclusive jurisdiction of the CFTC, so we're going to unfortunately have to work this issue through the court system, just as we had to when we were fighting about a Howey test and what it means to have an investment contract under the federal securities laws. But I'm very confident that when all is said and done, the courts are going to see this our way.
What's the timeline for that? Because obviously these things exist. They're not going anywhere. They've become a part of the zeitgeist, I would say, since the last election. Obviously, when they outperformed exit polls by many margins. Is this the sort of thing where you keep doing what you're doing and wait for the courts to tell you otherwise?
Well, I think the courts, by and large, have moved expeditiously to get to at least some preliminary rulings on some of these questions. But the fact of the matter is that court litigation just takes time. I would be shocked if this issue were resolved finally before the end of this year. I think it's going to bleed into 27. I also think that if federal courts of appeal rule in different ways, the Supreme Court's going to have to step in. But the law, the language, the will of Congress could not be clearer. And so we're going to continue to build. Others in this industry are going to continue, I think, invest in developing event contracts and making more products and services available to customers where they're permitted by law. And I just think the market's going to continue to dictate how this ultimately lands, which is, in favor of sensible prediction markets and event contracts, and against the idea that somehow casinos and sports books are the be all and end all.
It's interesting because it's hard to keep up with who's even suing who. But I know we have the CFTC suing 5 states in 4 weeks, I believe. That could have changed today. I haven't checked the news. But are these lawsuits going in both directions? And as you said, so even once you get clarity on any given lawsuit, it's...
The lawsuits are going in multiple directions. You mentioned the CFTC jumping in. And I think Chairman Mike Seelig has done excellent work in making clear that he intends to defend the CFTC's jurisdiction under the law. At the same time, we have seen a bunch of state gaming regulators, supported by the state attorneys general, bring their own actions. Some of the industry participants, like Coinbase, have brought our own affirmative cases against the state gaming regulators so that they could not play the game of rushing to state court on what is fundamentally a federal issue in an unfair way. So yeah, unfortunately, lawsuits are a part of this business from time to time, but I'm frankly quite confident that the courts are more than capable of rising to the challenge and sorting all these issues out in due course.
Yeah, I believe that will happen as well. And finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about is sort of the tokenization, real-world asset trend that's picking up steam, I think, at a faster rate than most people would have ever anticipated. The DTCC announced that with 50 partners, roughly, they're going to start basically testing tokenized equities. They've said they're going to move 4.5 quadrillion of volume on-chain. Where does Coinbase stand in that process? I think we know it's coming. We don't need to debate that. But how does that, impact your business, and how do you prepare for this tokenized future?
Well, we do see tokenization as the future, and we intend to be a leader in bringing that to markets, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. Look, for the longest time, I think people focused on tokenizing US dollars and other fiat currencies in the form of stable coins. And we've now seen that tokenization works. It allows for 24/7 settlement and activity. It allows for seamless transfer of value all over the world with the click of a button. There's no reason that other asset classes can't be tokenized in just the same ways we've tokenized dollars and other currencies with just as much adoption and just as much market demand. It's going to take some work on the part of regulators here in the US and all over the world to sort out some unique issues that come with tokenization based on blockchains. But again, we have regulators now, particularly in the US, who are more than capable of the task. I have no doubt that Chairman Paul Atkins, along with Chairman Seelig, are going to be able to resolve whatever outstanding regulatory issues remain. And we're going to see tokenization just race ahead in the months and years to come.
So what does that look like for Coinbase if all of these assets are tokenized? Everybody knows that there's the race to be the everything app.
Well,
right?
we're certainly in that race, and we think we're going to win the race to be the everything app or and offer an everything exchange. It's one of the reasons why we've invested so heavily in developing our suite of products and services in a way that goes far beyond just buying and selling Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. We think tokenization is the future. We think it's very important that customers and markets have choice about how to trade and move assets all over the world, and we want to be a part of that. We think we're not only going to do that, we're going to lead it.
Yeah, I mean, with about a minute and a half left, what does that look like for me as a consumer who comes to Coinbase if I consolidate the E-Trade accounts and the Schwab accounts and everything to Coinbase? What am I going to be able to do there that I can't do elsewhere or couldn't do in the past?
Oh, the possibilities are endless. Look, not only will you be able to settle 24/7 and trade 24/7 in a way that was never possible before, you're going to be able to engage in trading activity across all these different asset classes from a single app with a single interface in a way that's much simpler, much faster, much more efficient. You're also going to be able, going forward, to cross-margin assets and cross-margin trading in a way that I think was not possible just a short time ago. So you're going to see much more choice available as a customer, and you're going to also have much more power to manage your portfolio, manage your financial future in ways that simply weren't possible a short time ago.
Last very brief yes or no question. Do you think we see the Clarity Act done by this summer?
Yes.
See, I love the optimism because that means we can go on on Coinbase prediction markets. Probably, I would bet on the odds of the Clarity Act happening. Well, you are the first guest that we've had on the Daily Wolf. Like I said, usually I'm out here ranting and raving. I'm really hopeful that it does get done. I do believe that we're in a situation where we have to.
Absolutely.
It's really become essential, and interested to see how the prediction markets fight shakes out as well. So thank you for everything you're doing at Coinbase. We really appreciate you guys being in the middle of the fight. That's all we've got today for the Daily Wolf. We'll be back from Consensus tomorrow. Peace.